Stay with me, Sophia. Don't you dare close your eyes. Blood, white wedding dress, gunshots at the altar. But the paramedics who rushed to save the bride discovered something that would shatter everything Seoul thought it knew about love, loyalty, and the most dangerous family in Korea. Because Sophia Williams wasn't just any bride, and the man kneeling over her bleeding body wasn't just any groom. Hidden in her dress was a photograph that revealed a heartbreaking secret. Sewn into his tuxedo was a golden phoenix, the mark of Seoul's most feared crime family. What the witnesses thought was a random attack was actually the final move in a deadly game that had been 3 years in the making. A game that started when a broken American woman fleeing tragedy met a reluctant crime prince trying to escape his destiny. Hello, beautiful souls. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe because this story will show you how love can survive bullets and betrayal. The wedding they thought would be their happy ending, it was really just the beginning of a war that would either kill them both or prove that some love stories are worth bleeding for. This is the story of how a woman who lost everything found the one man who could give her a reason to live again, and how he almost lost her forever because of the family that made him who he was. 3 years earlier, Sophia Williams arrived in Seoul with a suitcase full of grief and no idea she was about to fall in love with the most dangerous man in the city. 3 years earlier, Sophia Williams arrived in Seoul with a heart full of grief and a desperate need to disappear from everything that reminded her of a life she'd lost. The car accident had taken everything: her husband David, their 4-year-old daughter Emma, and the future they'd planned together in their cozy Atlanta suburb. Sophia had been driving that rainy December night when the drunk driver ran the red light. She survived without a scratch. They didn't. For 2 years, she'd tried to rebuild in Georgia, but every street corner held memories that crushed her chest. Every playground, every family restaurant, every happy couple with children felt like a knife twisting in an already unbearable wound. Her therapist suggested a complete change of scenery. Sophia chose Seoul because it was as far from her old life as possible, a place where no one knew her story, where she could exist without constantly being the woman who lost her family. She rented a tiny apartment in Hongdae, took freelance translation jobs, and built a quiet life around small, manageable joys. Morning walks along the Han River, books in cozy cafes, language exchange meetups, where she could focus on helping others instead of dwelling on her own pain. For the first time in years, Sophia felt like she could breathe without drowning. Hyan Wu had been suffocating in his family's expectations his entire life. Born into the Golden Phoenix organization, he'd been groomed since childhood to inherit an empire built on fear and control. But Hyan Wu had never wanted power. He wanted to build something, create something that helped people instead of hurting them. He had degrees in architecture and urban planning, dreams of designing community centers and affordable housing. Instead, his days were filled with meetings about territory disputes and profit margins from businesses he'd never wanted to run. His father's recent stroke had accelerated the timeline for Hyan Wu's ascension, but instead of embracing his destiny, he'd been secretly exploring ways to legitimize the family operations. He wanted to transform their empire into something legal: real estate development, community investment, legitimate businesses that could employ their people without destroying lives. The problem was that going legitimate meant disappointing his father, defying family tradition, and potentially making enemies of people who'd been allies for generations. Hyan Wu felt trapped between who he was expected to be and who he actually wanted to become. He'd started spending his evenings away from family business, frequenting quiet cafes and cultural centers where he could think clearly about the future without the weight of expectations crushing his shoulders. He was looking for inspiration, for a sign that there was a different way to live. Neither Sophia nor Hyan Wu was looking for love. They were both just trying to figure out how to build something meaningful from the pieces of lives that hadn't turned out as planned. The ancient Jogisa temple wasn't where Sophia Williams expected to find herself on a Tuesday evening, but grief had its own navigation system that didn't always make logical sense. She'd been walking aimlessly through Seoul after finishing a particularly difficult translation project, a memoir about family loss that had reopened wounds she thought were finally healing. Her feet had carried her through the temple gates almost without conscious thought, drawn by the warm glow of lanterns and the peaceful chanting drifting from within. Sophia found herself in the main hall, sitting cross-legged on a meditation cushion, tears flowing silently down her cheeks as she stared at the golden Buddha statue. She wasn't religious, but something about the stillness here made her feel like it was safe to fall apart for a few minutes. "Excuse me," a gentle voice said in English. "Are you all right?" Sophia looked up to see a tall Korean man in an expensive suit kneeling beside her cushion. His eyes were kind but tired, like someone who understood the weight of carrying heavy things. He was holding a small package of tissues, extending them with the careful politeness of someone who didn't want to intrude but couldn't ignore obvious pain. "I'm sorry." Sophia wiped her face quickly. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone's meditation." "You're not disturbing anything," he assured her, settling onto the cushion beside hers with surprising grace for someone dressed so formally. "I come here when the weight gets too heavy. Sometimes crying is the only honest thing we can do." Something about his voice, warm, unguarded, infinitely patient, made Sophia's defensive walls crumble. "I lost my family 2 years ago," she found herself saying to this stranger. "I came to Korea to escape the memories, but some days they follow me anyway." Hyan Wu was quiet for a long moment, studying the Buddha statue with an expression Sophia couldn't read. "I'm about to inherit my family's business," he said finally. "It's not what I want, but everyone expects me to be grateful for the opportunity. Some days I feel like I'm drowning in other people's dreams for my life." They sat in comfortable silence, two strangers united by the feeling of being lost in lives they'd never quite chosen. "I'm Sophia," she said eventually. "Hyan Wu," he replied. "And I think we might be the only two people in Seoul who came to a temple to hide from our families instead of pray for them." Sophia laughed, actually laughed for the first time in months. "That's probably terrible karma." "Maybe," Hyan Wu smiled back. "Or maybe the universe brought us to the same place, because we're supposed to help each other figure out what comes next." Over the following months, Seoul transformed from Sophia's hiding place into something that felt dangerously close to home. All because of evening walks with a man who understood the art of careful healing. Hyan Wu began appearing at the temple every Tuesday, always with the same quiet presence that had drawn Sophia to him that first night. Their conversations were gentle, meandering things that covered everything from Korean architecture to Atlanta's food scene, but never pushed too hard into the painful territories they were both navigating. He learned that Sophia translated children's books because working with stories about families was the only way she could process her grief without drowning in it. She discovered that he spent his weekends volunteering at community centers, designing playground equipment, and mentoring at-risk youth. The closest he could get to his architectural dreams while managing family obligations. "You know," Sophia said one evening as they walked through Namsan Park, "you talk about your family business like it's a prison sentence." Hyan Wu was quiet for a long moment, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. "Some traditions feel more like cages than gifts. My father built something powerful, but I've never wanted power. I wanted to build homes where families could be happy." Sophia stopped walking, studying his profile in the lamplight. "What's stopping you?" "Family loyalty. Generational expectations. The fact that disappointing my father might destroy relationships I can never repair." He turned to face her. "What stopped you from staying in Atlanta and fighting through the grief there?" The question hit harder than Sophia expected. Cowardice, maybe, or self-preservation. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Their relationship deepened through shared vulnerability and small acts of care. Hyan Wu started bringing Sophia books in Korean, helping her improve her language skills while she helped him practice expressing his dreams in English. Sophia introduced him to American comfort foods, teaching him to make pancakes in her tiny kitchen while he showed her how to properly fold dumplings. But the outside world was beginning to intrude on their carefully constructed bubble. Sophia's friends in the expat community started asking questions about the mysterious Korean businessman who picked her up for dinner dates in expensive cars. Hyan Wu's family began expressing concern about his frequent absences from important meetings and his general lack of enthusiasm about assuming greater responsibilities. The tension came to a head during a family dinner that Hyan Wu reluctantly invited Sophia to attend. She spent the evening being politely interrogated by relatives who spoke in rapid Korean, clearly discussing her while smiling warmly to her face. "They think I'm a distraction," Sophia said afterward, her voice small. "They think I'm keeping you from becoming who you're supposed to be." "Maybe you are," Hyan Wu replied, taking her hands. "Maybe you're keeping me from becoming someone I was never supposed to be in the first place." Sophia was about to discover just how complicated loving someone from a powerful family could become. And Hyan Wu was about to learn that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who try hardest to control your choices. Sophia discovered the truth about Hyan Wu's family on a rainy Thursday night when she forgot her translation notes at his apartment and returned to find his living room filled with men in expensive suits discussing things that made her blood freeze. She'd used her spare key, expecting to find the quiet space where they'd spent countless evenings reading together. Instead, she walked into what looked like a corporate board meeting, if corporations discuss territorial disputes and protection fees. "The shipment from Busan needs to be rerouted," one man was saying in Korean, unaware that Sophia understood every word. "The police are asking too many questions about the docking schedules." "Handle it quietly," came Hyan Wu's voice from the kitchen. "I don't want any complications that could trace back to the family." Sophia pressed herself against the hallway wall, her heart hammering as fragments of conversation painted a picture she'd never wanted to see. These weren't discussions about legitimate business deals. They were planning operations that skirted the edges of legality, managing territories and contacts in ways that suggested influence far beyond normal corporate power. When the meeting ended and the men filed out, Sophia remained hidden until she heard Hyan Wu's footsteps approaching the living room. She stepped out then, her face pale but determined. "Sophia?" His expression shifted from surprise to something that looked like dread. "You weren't supposed to." "Golden Phoenix," she said quietly. "That's not just your family name, is it? It's an organization." Hyan Wu went very still. "How much did you hear?" "Enough to understand why your father expects you to take over the business." Sophia sat down heavily on his couch, the same couch where they'd shared so many quiet evenings. "Enough to realize why you feel trapped." For a long moment, they stared at each other across a space that suddenly felt like a chasm. "I've never hurt anyone," Hyan Wu said finally. "I've been trying to move everything toward legitimate operations. Real estate development, legal consulting, community investment. I want to transform what my father built into something that helps instead of controls." "But it's still what is right now," Sophia whispered. "And someone wants you to run it." "My father gave me an ultimatum yesterday." Hyan Wu's voice was barely audible. "Take full control by next month, or he'll pass leadership to my cousin Jae-hyun. Jae-hyun doesn't want to go legitimate. He wants to expand operations." Sophia felt something crack inside her chest. "And if you choose to walk away completely, then I lose my family forever. And the organization continues under someone who has no interest in protecting the people we currently employ or transitioning them to legal work." Sophia looked at this man she'd fallen in love with, the gentle soul who volunteered at community centers, who made her pancakes on Sunday mornings, who'd helped her believe in hope again. Now she understood why he'd seemed so lost that first night at the temple. "So you're not just choosing your future," she said slowly. "You're choosing everyone else's too." The manila envelope arrived at Sophia's apartment on a Monday morning with no return address, and timing that felt like a calculated blow to the heart. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing her and Hyan Wu over the past 6 months, walking through Namsan Park, sharing dinner at quiet restaurants, laughing together outside the temple where they'd first met. Someone had been documenting their entire relationship with the methodical precision of a surveillance operation. But it was a note attached that made Sophia's hand shake. "Ms. Williams, your relationship with Park Hyun-woo has created an interesting opportunity. He's scheduled to formally accept leadership of the Golden Phoenix tomorrow evening. His family believes you're the reason he's been hesitating to embrace his responsibilities. They're correct. If you truly care about his future and the welfare of the 200 families who depend on our organization for their livelihoods, you'll end this relationship today, permanently." A concerned family member. Sophia's phone rang immediately. "You received our message," said a voice she didn't recognize, speaking perfect English. "This is Hyan Woo's cousin. I think we should meet." An hour later, Sophia sat across from a man who looked like a sharper, colder version of Hyan Wu in an upscale Gangnam cafe. Hyun was impeccably dressed, articulate, and absolutely terrifying in his calm politeness. "Hyan Wu has always been too soft," Hyun explained, stirring his coffee with deliberate precision. "He sees charity cases and rehabilitation projects where he should see profit margins. The Golden Phoenix isn't a social welfare organization, Ms. Williams. It's a business empire that supports hundreds of families. He's trying to make it legitimate," Sophia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "He's trying to dismantle it," Hyun corrected. "His legitimization plans would eliminate 70% of our revenue streams and put most of our people out of work. The grocery store owners who pay us for protection, they'd lose their security. The import businesses that need our connections, they'd lose their competitive edge. The families who've worked for us for generations, unemployed." Sophia felt sick. "So you're using me to manipulate him?" "I'm giving you information so you can make an informed decision." Hyun's smile was razor sharp. "If Hyan Wu refuses leadership tomorrow, I take control. Unlike my cousin, I understand that sometimes traditional methods are the most effective methods. Your gentle influence has made him weak at precisely the moment he needs to be strong. What are you asking me to do? Leave Korea. Tonight. Quietly. Let him believe you couldn't handle his family's world. It will break his heart, but it will also free him to become the leader he was born to be." Sophia stared at this man who was systematically destroying her happiness with corporate efficiency. "And if I don't, then you'll watch him destroy himself, trying to protect an organization he's fundamentally unsuited to run. The Golden Phoenix will collapse within 2 years under his leadership, taking down everyone who depends on us, including the woman he loves." Hyun slid a plane ticket across the table. "Your flight leaves at midnight. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Sophia walked home in a daze, her world tilting on its axis. By evening, she was packed, her apartment stripped of everything that made it feel like home. She left a single note for Hyan Wu on his kitchen counter. "I can't be the reason you lose everything you've tried to build. Some love isn't meant to survive in the real world. I hope you find peace with the choice you make." Sophia was about to sacrifice her happiness for what she believed was Hyan Woo's greater good. But what she didn't realize was that Hyan Wu had already made a choice that would change everything, and someone was about to pay a terrible price for underestimating the power of love. Hyan Wu found Sophia's note at 2 a.m., 3 hours after her plane had already left Korean airspace, and for the first time in his adult life, he allowed himself to fall completely apart. He sat on his kitchen floor, reading her words over and over, understanding with devastating clarity that the woman he loved had sacrificed their future because she thought it was the noble thing to do. Sophia had walked away to protect him, never realizing she was the only thing that had been protecting him all along. By dawn, his grief had crystallized into something sharper: suspicion. Sophia had never run from difficult things. She'd lost her entire family and still found the strength to build a new life. She'd learned about his family's business and chosen to help him transform it rather than flee. The woman who'd faced down her deepest trauma wouldn't abandon him unless someone had convinced her was the only way to save him. Hyan Wu made a phone call that would change everything. "Jae-hyun," he said when his cousin answered. "We need to talk. Now." They met at the Golden Phoenix headquarters, in the boardroom where Hyan Wu was supposed to formally accept leadership in 12 hours. Jae-hyun looked comfortable, confident, like a man whose carefully laid plans were finally paying off. "I assume you're ready to accept your responsibilities now that your distraction has been removed?" Jae-hyun asked. "Tell me exactly how Sophia decided to leave," Hyan Wu said quietly. "She realized she was holding you back from your destiny. Women often come to their senses when they understand the bigger picture." "What bigger picture did you paint for her?" Something flickered in Jae-hyun's eyes, a tell that Hyan Wu had learned to read during years of family poker games. "I may have helped her understand the consequences of your idealistic approach to business management." Hyan Wu felt a cold, familiar anger rising. Not the explosive rage that had defined his father's leadership style, but the calculated fury of a man who'd finally seen enough. "You threatened her. I gave her options. She chose wisely." "No." Hyan Wu stood, his voice carrying a new kind of authority. "She chose love. She thought she was protecting me by walking away. What she actually did was show me exactly what I'm fighting for." Meanwhile, halfway across the Pacific Ocean, Sophia was staring out an airplane window and finally seeing the truth with startling clarity. Jae-hyun's manipulation had been masterful. He convinced her that loving Hyan Wu meant destroying him, that staying meant watching him fail. But Sophia had spent 2 years learning to distinguish between protecting someone and enabling their fears. She'd been so afraid of becoming another burden that she'd forgotten the most important thing she'd learned in therapy. Sometimes love means standing beside someone while they fight their battles, not fighting the battles for them. Hyan Wu had never asked her to leave. He'd asked her to help him build something better. Sophia reached for the airplane phone, her heart pounding as she dialed the only number that mattered. "Hyan Wu." "Sophia." His voice cracked with relief. "Where are you?" "About to make the biggest mistake of my life, unless you tell me there's still a choice to make." Sophia's plane was still 3 hours from Los Angeles when she made the decision that would define the rest of her life. Using every favor she'd accumulated with airline staff and paying fees that would drain her savings account, she managed to get herself on the next flight back to Seoul. 14 hours later, she stood in the lobby of the Golden Phoenix headquarters, looking like she'd survived a natural disaster, but with eyes blazing with determination. "I need to see Park Hyan Wu," she told the receptionist. "Tell him Sophia Williams is here, and I brought something his cousin needs to see." Minutes later, she was escorted to the boardroom where the entire Golden Phoenix Leadership Council had gathered for Hyan Wu's formal acceptance ceremony. Jae-hyun's face went white when he saw her. "Gentlemen," Sophia said, addressing the room in fluent Korean, "I think you should know that Park Jae-hyun has been manipulating this succession by threatening people Hyan Wu cares about." She placed a digital recorder on the conference table. "Yesterday's conversation is all here. His threats, his admission that he manipulated me into leaving, and his real plans for the organization." The recording played in devastating clarity. Jae-hyun's voice filled the room, describing how he'd used Sophia to break Hyan Wu's resolve and his intention to abandon all legitimization efforts once he gained control. Hyan Wu's father, despite his recent stroke, was present via video conference. His voice, though weakened, carried absolute authority. Jae-hyun, you are expelled from this family and this organization. Hyan Wu, you will lead, but on your terms. With respect, father, Hyan Wu said, taking Sophia's hand, I'll lead, but not alone. The Golden Phoenix is going completely legitimate within 2 years. We're becoming a community development corporation focused on affordable housing, small business loans, and neighborhood revitalization. Anyone who doesn't want to be part of that transition can leave with full severance and references. The room buzzed with murmurs, but one by one, the council members nodded their agreement. They'd seen what Jae-hyun's leadership would have brought, and Hyun-woo's vision offered something better: pride in their work instead of fear of exposure. 6 months later, the Golden Phoenix Community Development Corporation had already broken ground on 3 affordable housing projects and established a microloan program that was being studied by urban planners across Asia. Hyan Wu proposed to Sophia in the community garden they'd helped design in their old neighborhood. Surrounded by families whose homes they'd helped finance and children playing on playground equipment he'd personally designed. I know we've already survived the worst, he said, kneeling among the roses, ready to try the best. The wedding shooting at Seoul's Four Seasons was Jae-hyun's final, desperate act of revenge, and his greatest miscalculation. Exiled from the family and blacklisted from legitimate business, he'd spent months planning what he thought would be the perfect payback, destroying Hyun-woo's happiness the way his own ambitions had been destroyed. But Jae-hyun had underestimated the kind of community his cousin had built. The wedding guests, who transformed into a security team, weren't hired muscle. They were residents of the affordable housing complexes Hyan Wu and Sophia had developed, small business owners who'd received Golden Phoenix microloans, community leaders who'd watched the couple pour their hearts in a neighborhood revitalization. They'd volunteered to protect the wedding because Sophia and Hyan Wu had spent 2 years protecting them. Jae-hyun's hired gunman was tackled by Mr. Kim, the elderly grocery store owner whose shop had been saved by their community investment program. The second shooter was stopped by Maria Santos, whose Filipino-Korean Cultural Center had been Sophia's first major translation project. Sophia's injury was real but minor, a graze from a bullet that never should have found its target thanks to the human shield of people who loved them. This, Sophia said from her hospital bed, gesturing to the flower-filled room crowded with visitors, this is what we built instead of an empire. Detective Kim closed his file 3 days later. Jae-hyun was in custody, his hired guns had confessed, and the case was solved with the kind of community cooperation he'd never seen before. 2 years later, Sophia Williams Park sat in their sunlit apartment, watching Hyan Wu teach their 1-year-old daughter Grace to stack building blocks while he explained architectural principles she was far too young to understand. She's going to be an engineer, Sophia laughed, photographing Grace's determined concentration. Or a translator who helps people communicate across cultures, Hyan Wu countered, settling beside his wife. Or maybe she'll just be happy, which is all that really matters. Their apartment overlooked the community center they'd built together, a space where Korean families and international residents gathered for language classes, cultural events, and children's programs. Through their windows, they could see kids playing in the garden where Hyan Wu had proposed, families sharing meals at picnic tables Sophia had helped design. They transformed a criminal empire into something that actually served the community it had once controlled. More importantly, they proved that love could heal trauma, change destinies, and build something beautiful from the broken pieces of 2 very different lives. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more impossible romances. What do you think made their love strong enough to survive everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below.